The Roman philosopher Seneca once said, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." Think about that for a second. How many battles have you fought in your head that never actually happened? How many arguments have you won against people who weren't even in the room? How many nights have you lost staring at the ceiling, terrified of a future that never arrived? Today, I want to share a story with you. It's an ancient tale about a young man named Kenji, a dark forest, and a monster that wasn't what it seemed. If you are someone who overthinks, worries, or feels the weight of anxiety, this story isn't just a story, it is a mirror. Let's begin. Long ago, in a quiet village nestled between the misty mountains of Japan, there lived a young man named Kenji. Kenji was intelligent. He was hardworking. He had a kind heart. But he carried a heavy burden, invisible to everyone else. Kenji suffered from the disease of what if. His mind was like a storm that never settled. While other villagers enjoyed their tea, Kenji was busy calculating disasters. If he planted rice, he worried about a drought. What if the rain never comes, he would think. If he spoke to a stranger, he worried about judgment. What if they laugh at me? He was living his life in a state of constant rehearsal for tragedies that hadn't happened. He was a prisoner of his own mind. One autumn evening, an urgent matter required Kenji to travel to the neighboring town. The only way to get there before morning was to cut through the silent valley. The villagers avoided the valley after dark. They told stories of wolves, bandits, and spirits that wandered the woods. But Kenji had no choice. He set off just as the sun began to dip below the horizon. At first, he walked confidently, but as the orange light faded into a bruised purple and finally into black, the forest changed. The trees, which looked majestic in the day, now looked like skeletal fingers reaching for him. The wind howling through the branches sounded like whispers. Kenji's heart began to race. Thump, thump, thump. His breath became shallow. He was entering the domain of his greatest enemy, the unknown. About halfway through his journey, the fog rolled in, thick and heavy. Kenji slowed his pace, squinting into the darkness. Suddenly he froze. 50 paces ahead, right in the center of the narrow path, sat a shape. It was massive. It was pitch black. It crouched low to the ground, its shoulders hunched, looking ready to pounce. Kenji's mind, his overactive, terrified mind, immediately filled in the blanks. It's a wolf, he thought. No, it's too big for a wolf. It's a bear, a man-eating bear. He could almost see its eyes glowing in the dark. He could imagine its heavy breathing. He was sure the beast was staring right at him, waiting for him to make a single move. Kenji didn't run. He knew that if he turned his back, the beast would chase him. So he slowly backed away and hid behind a large oak tree. And there he stayed, for hours. This is where the real torture began. The beast hadn't touched him. The beast hadn't even roared. But in Kenji's mind, he had already died 1,000 times. He gripped a small fruit knife in his shaking hand. He played out every scenario. If I attack, I'll miss, and it will maul me. If I stay here, I'll freeze to death. If I die here, who will take care of my mother? Who will manage the shop? He felt the phantom pain of claws tearing into him. He felt the grief of his own funeral. He cried silent tears for a life he thought was over. Every time a twig snapped, he flinched. Every time the wind rustled, he prepared for the end. He spent 8 hours crouched in the dirt, exhausted, hungry, and paralyzed by terror. He was fighting a war against a shadow. Finally, the mercy of dawn arrived. The sky turned a soft gray, then a pale blue. The sun began to pierce through the canopy of the trees. Kenji, eyes red from lack of sleep, body aching from tension, decided to take one last look. He had to know. Was the beast still there? He peeked around the oak tree. The shape was still there. It hadn't moved an inch. Kenji gathered every ounce of courage he had left. He stepped out from behind the tree. As the sunlight hit the path, the fog dissolved. Kenji stopped. He blinked. His mouth fell open. There was no bear. There was no wolf. There was no monster. It was an old, jagged tree stump. The shadows of the night, combined with the thick fog, had tricked his eyes. But it was his mind that had turned a piece of dead wood into a deadly enemy. Kenji walked up to the stump. He touched the rough bark. He started to laugh. It was a hysterical laugh, mixed with tears. He had wasted his energy, his peace, and his entire night trembling in fear of a block of wood. He sat down next to that stump and realized the greatest lesson of his life. The monster was never on the path. The monster was in his mind. My friends, we all have tree stumps in our lives. That email you're afraid to open, it's a tree stump. That conversation you're avoiding, it's a tree stump. That fear of the future that keeps you awake at 3 a.m. It is a shadow magnified by the fog of your anxiety. When the light of truth shines on it, you will see it for what it really is, harmless. Don't let the shadows steal your peace. Wait for the sunrise, breathe, and keep walking. Thanks for watching.